Craig leads the company's efforts in demand gen, oversees all of the Pardot and Salesforce development, Pardot being integrated with Salesforce.com, as well as managing the company's website. Craig Jordan.
All right. Testing, 1, 2, 3. Thank you, Joel. So who's mFoundry? We are a SaaS company. We build mobile banking and mobile payment technologies for Android and Apple devices. Excuse me. Our two biggest clients are Starbucks and Bank of America. You might have heard of them. Keep going. So I interpreted this a little differently. I thought of audience building as in, we had our inbound efforts, we got them to our websites. Now, how do we convert them? How do we build those lists out? There's a lot of talk of forms today, and I loved it that both Lori and Matthew covered this because it's a really simple step you can take that's going to increase your conversion rates quite a bit. I try to challenge myself with every form I build to try to make it 5 fields or less. For audience building, for audience building in particular, I'll try to speak as loud as I can. Apologies. Try to minimize it to email and full name. That's all you need. You will have other conversion points and other touch points with the content and the forms that you're going to have down the road with your individual prospects. So there's no need to kind of overburden them off the bat and make them bounce. The second tip I wanted to talk about for audience building is know your audience. Very similar to kind of progressive profiling. At mFoundry, we have a very long sales cycle, and we also have a lot of individual decision makers for the financial institutions we're trying to work with. So we're always looking for that one champion, 1 or 2 champions. So as such, we try to deliver our content dynamically to those different profile types. So if it's a marketing buyer, they ask a lot of different questions than a technical buyer. We also have compliance and things like that. Where this is going to help you is you're going to be able to take this concept and apply it to a lot of different areas, such as your content development and how you build out your forms to make it a little more dynamic. The third tip I want to talk about is cross-promotion. So what do I mean by that? Who here uses Amazon.com? Everybody. So let's say I go to Amazon and I want to buy a new toy for my dog. Amazon does a really good job of telling me kind of what I want in addition to buying that toy for my dog. So by the end of it, I'm buying 10 different things. It's very similar to digital marketing. When you get someone to your website, you want to make sure that they know exactly what else you have available. One of the things that is really important is grabbing their attention and maintaining it. As Matthew pointed out, we have 8-second attention spans. So you want to use a variety of tools and techniques on your website to do this. One of those tools is called Lightbox. Lightbox is a simple JavaScript plugin that you can use. That'll have, if you've ever clicked on an image and it pops up and the background kind of goes a little darker like a movie theater, that's a Lightbox. Where this is incredibly powerful is that if I want to build out my newsletter list, I can have this pop up on my blog, and it's super powerful because it makes the visitor take an action. Either they're going to opt into my list or they're simply going to say no thanks, which is totally okay. But what it does is it goes from kind of a passive here in my sidebar of a simple form to I'm at the front of my marketing efforts to trying to get someone to convert. Another really great tool is called Hello Bar. Hello Bar is another JavaScript plugin, and bear in mind you don't need to know how to code at all for this. That'll pop up on any web page that you have. You can A/B test it, it's great. You write a little snippet of copy and a call to action. So particular to audience building, if I want someone to go to a landing page, it animates so it catches their eye, use kind of different colors than your typical branding so that someone can spot it. They'll be like, oh, I'm interested in this next webinar. Or I really want this piece of content, and they'll take action. The third, which isn't directly related to list building, and for all you WordPress users out there, there's a plugin called UpPrev, which stands for up and previous. What this does, if I'm on my blog and I'm reading, if you've ever been on the New York Times website, at the end of an article, you have a little box that flies in that says, hey, read this article as well. And how this is important in list building is because you want to maintain kind of retention of visitors to your site. You want more opportunities to cross-promote and upsell. And finally, but I didn't mention this earlier, but my career started as a web developer and web designer. So I'm always trying to think about user experience, and I try to encourage all digital marketers out there, and marketers in general, to think about that as well. Personal preference, I don't want to fill out 17 fields in a form. But at the end of the day, I also want to think about, am I being too obtrusive? A lot of these tools are not. For Lightbox, for example, you can increase your conversion percentages for your newsletter by upwards of 400%. That's insane. That's astronomical figures. But the really simple steps that you can take and tools that you can have in your arsenal to help you kind of achieve better engagement, or better list building, excuse me. And finally, tracking. We're all marketers here. We all love our stats. I'm a massive data geek, so I'll try to keep this as on point as I can. Google UTM parameters. So what is that? Basically, any link you have, you can attribute campaign source, the medium, whether it's a CPC campaign, what have you, and an individual variation of that medium. All in Google Analytics, all associated with that individual prospect. And it becomes something really powerful because you can pinpoint exactly what's working and what's not. And that kind of, at the end of the day, really will help drive your audience and list building. There's a couple other tools out there, such as Bitly. So if I make that UTM parameter link, I put it in Bitly, I can get notified when someone clicks it. And then finally, don't be afraid to get too granular, but there's a caveat to it. Make sure that anytime you are tracking something within a particular campaign down to the tweet, have clear objectives in mind, because it can get really burdensome really fast. So you want to make sure that you can figure out what's working and what's not, but just check yourself a little bit. All right, content design. So what's the number one piece of content that mFoundry uses to engage our prospects? As I mentioned, our sales cycle is incredibly long. To put it in terms of what Matt was talking about, this is very much a later stage piece of content. This was campaign oriented. So this white paper was built with the mindset of trying to debunk an incumbent provider of mobile banking. There's a lot of legacy providers that built other systems that just kind of rolled out channel. mFoundry is a little different, where we're solely focused on mobile. I have this bullet point about modular content design. So what do I mean by that? Think of it kind of as building blocks. So you can target your emails and your messaging based on personas and profile types, but within your content, it's a static document. So you want to think very similar to that. So for this one, it was competitor specific. If I wanted to change it to another competitor, could I do that readily? For this particular document, we built it like that. So for all the charts, for some of the copy, we could just plug and play, if you will, and make it more relevant for future use for different campaigns. We also are very heavily data focused. We're lucky enough to have great companies like Forrester that have a lot of research and other regulatory agencies such as the Fed that releases information about banking. On top of that, we have the iTunes Store. So we have really good data resources that we can readily swap out within our content to make it more relevant depending on the stage of the buyer or the particular campaign type. So finally, engagement. So what's the best method to stay engaged? I personally love this slide. So attacking on multiple fronts. So what does that mean? Being a small or relatively small startup company and then moving along to about 170 employees, we had to be really nimble. I've been the only guy in the marketing team for about a year now. So you have to use kind of your toolbox, and there are some things that get overlooked and nothing's perfect. But when you start thinking about, okay, how can I touch these different prospects at different places to make sure I'm retaining them and they're coming back to my site and being engaged, here are a couple of methods you can do that. So retargeted ad campaigns, as was mentioned earlier. Great website, retargeter.com. You can, when someone comes to my site or my landing page and they might not convert or they might convert, I can target ads against them when they're browsing the web. I can do this on Facebook. I can do this virtually anywhere to make them come back. Drip marketing, my personal and ultimate favorite. We all know what it is, or at least I hope so, where I can send out catered email messages on behalf of my sales guys to make sure we're staying at the forefront when our prospects are coming to buying decisions. Finally, repurposing old content. You put a lot of time and energy into developing content, so why not use it more? Sometimes you develop it for a short-term game, other times you develop it for long-term. They're great tools. Once again, WordPress. They actually have an automation where you can repost old blog posts to Twitter. So it's something as simple as thinking through those different methodologies of how you can reuse your content and kind of re-engage people more. Finally, channel alignment. A couple of you have talked about it today. Basically, you want to think of it as, if I have all these different touch points and all these different messages, I want to make sure that everything is similar. Also preparing my sales guys for when they have that eventual phone call and that final conversion to start their cycle, to make sure they know what to say. Finally, the last tip I'm going to close on is educate your prospects. As I mentioned, we have a pretty long sales cycle. I think the longest we ever had was almost 3 years, so pretty ridiculous. But as I mentioned, we have a ton of internal stakeholders. So when we're trying to educate, we want to empower these champions, if you will, to make sure that they know just as much about our products and what they're currently using or not using, so that they can come to an informed decision. But most importantly, we want to stay top of mind. We want to use these techniques like drip marketing, retargeting ads, and simply just engaging them on a consistent basis to make sure they know who we are and what we do. But once again, another caveat, you don't want to overburden people. You don't want to send an email a day unless you specify this is your daily email. But you want to make sure that they're getting the content that you've developed, you're getting it to them in a readily way, and you're making sure you're optimizing your website and your content so that they can ultimately come to that eventual buying decision. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much, Craig.